Good morning, everyone. How's it going? Can you see me? All right, this is going to be a dark video, better for an audio podcast. But I wanted to start off the morning. I'm on my way driving to jiu-jitsu. I just started taking jiu-jitsu early in the morning instead of evening classes. So I get to go bright and early. It's still dark outside. And this is a topic I wanted to talk about actually over the weekend, and I just didn't get around to it, so I figured I would do it now. Better done than perfect. And the topic is really something that is targeted to chiropractors and chiropractic students alike. I've been talking to a lot of chiropractic students lately, and I realized that their perspective and their questions on things and their curiosity is very helpful because it helps bring up topics that I forget that practicing chiropractors maybe need to hear the pros and cons to as well, because a lot of us in practice maybe have tried things or have certain viewpoints on pieces of practice. We practice a certain way. We've maybe been given bad information, had a bad experience, so it's led us to stick with something or avoid something else. So anyway, the topic is care plans, the pros and cons of care plans, and how it really works. So this is from my own personal experience, from what I've seen. And I want to talk about the pros and cons. I've been practicing as a chiropractor close to 18 years, and I didn't always practice the same way. So early on in practice, it was adjustment only, and sometimes we would play around with care plans. Sometimes we wouldn't. It was not very structured. I'll tell you that. It was not very structured, and there was several year period where I would just see a bunch of new patients in a week. I'd give them initial recommendations of coming in as close together as possible to try to get them figured out from their current ailment of what brought them in. And my PVA was probably like 5 visits, and I'd never see the person again, but I had 15 new patients every week, give or take, maybe 10. So there were so many new patients feeding the machine that I didn't really have time to think about or worry about patients that were not continuing on with some type of care. And the care wasn't all that structured. It was very just fly by the seat of the pants. And it worked in the sense that I filled up my schedule and I saw lots of people. But where it stopped working is not that we ever didn't have an influx of tons of new patients. It was this freak thing at this clinic in New Mexico where we just had so many new patients with little to no marketing. But where it stopped working is when I started looking again clinically at what I wanted to do for my patients and what I wanted results wise and what I wanted for my own peace of mind of doing what I'm doing and not feeling just like a robot, just adjusting people over and over and over again, but not having any sort of tangible, objective measurement of their progress and success. And I started to feel like, oh, these people that only came in 5 times, am I really helping these people to the extent that we all learn about in chiropractic? And the answer to that was no. So that's where I then got into chiropractic corrective care. I started going to chiropractic biophysics seminars, and that's when care plans became an obvious necessity when you now have something objective to measure with a patient, and you have clinical care that's required to be able to gain that objective change. And so now, mind you, I'm not talking about doing specific techniques. I'm not talking about chiropractic biophysics in this. I'm talking about, I think, the difference between a practitioner that doesn't do care plans and does do care plans, and some of the requirements to be on one side of the fence or the other. So let's just talk about the kind of chiropractor that doesn't do care plans. Yesterday, I got an email from a company. I'm not going to name the company, but I got an email from a company that I get periodically that I think does a really good job at handling conditions and teaching chiropractors on conditions and pointing them to various protocols to handle the conditions. They have a website put together. Great idea. And I was looking at it and I was reading the about section about one of the founders. And in his founding statement, I mean, he's so adamant about this, and it spells out this divide in chiropractic. He says, our goal is to get a patient feeling better. So it's all about feeling better, doing better, something like that, out of pain. So it's about pain as soon as possible, and then teach them what they need to know so they don't ever have to see me again. Okay, and that's literally what this guy said, and they wear that as like this badge of honor, and I realize that's a certain type of chiropractor that's been taught that's a superior way to practice ethically, morally. It means that you're taking the high ground, and you're not like those other chiropractors that tell people they have to keep coming back, those other chiropractors that have care plans that tell people they should come in 3 times a week and twice a week, because that's not good for some reason. That's the undertone that I get. It's a little bit of a self-righteous position. I think it's developed because they want to steer on the exact opposite end of the shady type of chiropractor that used to be around, that's still around probably, in these big practice management companies that I'm not sure if they're still teaching this, where they say, yep, what you need to do is convince a patient they need to come in 3 times a week for 6 months, and then twice a week for this long, and you sell them a whole care plan for a year, and if they're not willing to do it, then you don't do anything with them. You kick them out the door, and essentially it's a numbers game, and you just do all these loss leader, for free x-rays, free this to get them in, and then maybe 2 or 3 out of 10 of the people that come in are going to bite on these big care plan recommendations that in the care plan recommendation you're suggesting them a ton of times. You're just doing tons of adjustments over and over and over again, and maybe you're using the rhetoric in saying that you're doing corrective care, or maybe you're talking about curves and using an x-ray as more of like a sales product and not necessarily a clinical tool, and something that you really do anticipate to see measurable, tangible change. But maybe it's just another piece of the sales process, and you're going to do the same care on every single patient, regardless of what they have. So I get wanting to be on the opposite spectrum of that, because I don't think that's good. I don't think that's good for a patient, for our profession. I wouldn't want my own parents or own family to fall into that type of care. I don't think it's ethical. I think it's just bad across the board. So I understand wanting to go the polar opposite of that level of care, and I think that's what has motivated some of these chiropractors to wear that proverbial badge of honor of, I only see someone 5 times and then they never come back and see me again. Okay, so now that you know that that's one side of the spectrum, that's the other side of the spectrum, then I think there is truth, which lies kind of in a combination of that. And that's where if you as the chiropractor and you as your clinic has objective, measurable tools, and you have things you're doing in your care, whether in office, at home, combination thereof, that are going to promote that sort of change. So, i.e. curve correction, i.e. functional improvement. If you're doing that and you're measuring this and you're motivating and you're then setting goals for your patient, that is a type of corrective care that necessitates a care plan. Patients understand that, they get that, they're looking for guidance and a care plan in most cases, in my experience from talking to patients. And it's very rare that we get pushback from patients saying, oh, I have to come in, or oh, I have to do this. There's patients we see that come in from day one and they say, hey, I went to this other chiropractor. They try to tell me straight off the bat, I have to pay $4,000 and I got to come in this many times, and I'm not looking to do that. I have a handful of patients that come in that way, and then we talk to them and we say, look, there's going to be some similar attributes that you're going to see to the way we practice, but the reason we practice this way is as follows. And with that said, we're happy to take care of you however you want to be taken care of. But just understand, if you're a candidate for this type of care, meaning if you have these problems going on in your spine, in your posture, in your movement patterns, and you want to get the best results possible, clinically, the way to do that is in a structured level of care where we set goals, we remeasure objective findings, we fine-tune care as needed, and then we remeasure at a certain endpoint in that first phase of care to then see how you responded. Does that make sense? And then, the vast majority of those people were like, oh yeah, if this was explained to me like this at the other place I went to, it would have made a lot more sense. But we never even took x-rays, or we never took x-rays after the fact, or we never did any kind of movement assessment, so on and so on. So at the end of the day, in this brief discussion, because now I'm here at my final destination, didn't take very long, is that care plans are essential based on how you practice. They're essential if you're doing objective style of care. They are frowned upon if you are just giving all your patients the same regurgitated care recommendations as the next person, and if it doesn't change based on what's going on with the individual. Now I'll specify too, for us, how we've done this, because at one point I tried to highly modify the frequency and duration of the first phase of care. And when I'm saying first phase, I mean the initial corrective care process. I used to try to really modify this for multiple different adults based on what was going on, and I found out, you know what? It really doesn't need to be modified all that much for the first couple of months you see someone. You should see everyone at a pretty consistent frequency, is what I found. And so that then led me to developing categories where I said, okay, if you're a moderate to severe adult, and then I have various things that define what makes it a moderate to severe adult, but that, to be honest, it's most adults that we see. And then there's like a mild adult. Children are a different category as far as typically less duration, similar frequency, which is usually twice a week once they're off to the start. So first couple weeks, in most cases 3 times a week, and then once someone starts to understand what they're doing in the clinic, they understand all the different corrective pieces that they need to be properly doing at home as well. And we've at least started to affect their original symptoms to at least satisfy their original desire for coming in, which our goal is not symptom care, but symptoms is what's in the patient's mind. So you definitely need to calm the symptoms and get them feeling better so you can catch their attention. Plus, if their symptom is going to be inhibiting them from doing the things that are going to actually fix them in the corrective phase, you have to get them out of symptoms. So talking about symptoms is not a bad word, but focusing on that as your only goal in care is teaching your patient that symptoms are the last thing to show up and the first thing to go away is very, very important. But it's still something that needs to be addressed. And if you don't address the symptoms quick enough, then oftentimes people aren't going to really get on board with what you are talking about, because that's at the forefront of their mind initially. So anyway, with that said, care plans, I would say, based on the way that you practice, based on the way that we practice, are completely important, should be done 100% of the time. You need to have goal-oriented care. I think that without having some sort of measurable goal, without patients knowing where they're going and what we're trying to obtain for them, will inevitably make them lose focus, fall out of care, and not actually use these things that you teach them to put this into a lifestyle. Okay, instead this is just a short moment in their life. They're going to forget all about you. Nothing you showed them is going to actually sink in or do any good long term, and all you've done has been an expensive aspirin. Okay, so I don't want to do that. I know you don't want to do that. If you found this helpful, throw a comment, give something, thumbs up, something on the back end if you're watching this on a replay. Check out our demo if you haven't already, demo.movenowyou.com. We have a student demo as well, demo.movenowyou.com/prepared. So I made a slightly different student demo talking to students. So demo.movenowyou.com for practicing chiropractors, and demo.movenowyou.com/prepared for students or recent graduates. Hope you found this helpful, and we'll talk to you in the next one.